الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله رب السماوات ورب الأرض رب العالمين، وله الكبرياء في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. الحمد لله الذي بنعمته تتم الصالحات. ربنا لك الحمد حتى ترضى، ولك الحمد إذا رضيت، ولك الحمد بعد الرضا. صلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيد الأولين والآخرين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له الملك الحق المبين، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صفيه من خلقه وخليله وأمينه على وحيه. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, all praise and glory and thanks are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We owe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala everything we have. وَمَا بِكُم مِّن نِعْمَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ. So do your best to express your thankfulness, to remind yourself first of the countless bounties and favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to remind yourself to be thankful and to express your gratitude and appreciation and thankfulness both in words and in deeds. In words from the bottom of your heart, expressing to Allah that you really appreciate what He has given you, and in deeds by using them fi sabilillah, using the time, the health, the power, the resources that Allah has given you as much as possible fi sabilillah. Father, can you make this? My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, inshallah we're continuing our series and talking about the three dimensions that I believe are extremely important to help us understand our reality and to help us fixing it. And these are our deen, our history, our reality. Our religion, our history, and our reality. This is, by the way, it's not only important at the level of societies and nation, but it is also important even in our personal life and our family life. If you know what you're supposed to do, your role, that's the deen, or your role as a spouse, or your role as a parent. If you understand the problems or the reality, if you understand how you came to this point, then you'll be able to fix the problem. If you don't meet any of these three requirements, or all of them, then problems cannot be fixed. And a lot of time I have seen cases where people, out of good intention, they make the problem worse. Why? Because they don't understand it. They're trying to fix it, and they do things that only make the problem worse. That's why it's very important to have the proper understanding and implementation of our deen. So if we have that, if we properly understand our deen and implement it properly, if we have the proper assessment of our history, the proper reading, forget about the superficial, rosy narration that is very prevalent, the real history, objectively. If we have the proper assessment and diagnosis of our reality, then we should not be in these conditions. Very simple. We are in these conditions because the lack of proper understanding, either of deen and or history and or our reality. This reality is not normal, even though it has been there for a long time, to the point that we came to accept it, that's it, that's the best we can do. That's not true. It's not normal, and more importantly, it does not please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because we are nowhere close to description of the Quran of the community with whom Allah is pleased. The prophetic community of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are some description of the community with whom Allah is pleased in Quran. If we check ourselves against those criteria, we don't get the passing grade. It's not like we don't get a very good grade, we don't even get a pass grade. We are way below that standard. And it's still okay. If we accept that reality or acknowledge it, and we try to understand and we try to fix it, that's still okay. Nations can go through crisis, ups and downs, so that's not the end of the world. But if we remain in denial, and we're trying to find excuses and justification, then we're going to stay where we are. We are in this situation, my dear brother and sister in Islam, situation that you know, and if you're not sure, go and read the statistics, because numbers do not lie. Read the statistics about where Muslim world and Muslim countries rank in different indicators, in the good indicators and in the bad ones. Look where Muslim countries are ranking, and as again, numbers do not lie. We are in this situation because, and all the attempts of reform have failed because they did not meet one or more of those requirements. If you try to fix the situation without the proper understanding of it, of the problem, or without the proper understanding of our deen, because we are the product of Islam, so we are as good as our understanding and commitment to Islam. If there is a problem in that understanding and commitment, it's going to reflect in our situation. All these attempts were built on the fact that, listen to this narration, all these attempts of Islah or reform, they were built on the fact that now we have the proper understanding of our deen, we have the proper understanding of our history, which was all great. That's the narration. And we know what the problem is. Based on that, we move to try to fix it, and it doesn't get fixed. A lot of attempts, they solved the problem they perceived. What they thought is the problem, they fixed it. But then they looked around, situation did not change. Give you many examples. At a certain point in time, we thought the problem was colonization. So people rallied, they pushed colonization out. Things did not change. At a certain point in time, people thought that the problem is that Muslims are not practicing Islam. They are not in the mosques, they are not praying. So they brought people to Islam and to hijab, etc. Situation did not change. And more recently, people thought the problem is dictatorship. So they rallied in revolutions to topple these regimes, and look what happened. From Tunisia to Libya to Egypt, etc. I mean, those regimes are gone, where the situation is. So you solved the problem, what you perceived is the problem, but the situation, which means that your assessment was wrong, or at least was partial. That was part of the problem, not the whole problem. Or that was the symptoms, not even the root cause. They say it's a joke, but they said that surgeon will come out and say the surgery was successful, but the patient died. I did my job, and the surgery was successful. Like, okay, where is the patient? No, the patient died. So that's what's happening, keep happening, that the problem we think it's solved, but the change did not happen. So we always know, we think we know what's the problem, but we don't. Actually, we have very superficial understanding. So when we try to move forward based on this very shaky foundations, the attempts fail. And we find ourselves back to square one. And in most of the Muslim countries nowadays, with very few exceptions, and all Arab countries, with very few exceptions, they are in that circular motion. Some people are starting the cycle, a lot of people are in the middle. The middle is the status quo. The middle is the long period that lasts for many years, that's the status quo. And then they start the end of the cycle, where people get fed up and they explode, and then regime change, and then they start a new cycle. Phase 1, and then phase 2, very long, phase 3, and the circular motion. That's what we have been going through for so long now. And unfortunately, we remain in denial. When things fail, we don't just go and say what went wrong, what lessons we can learn so that next time we avoid them. No, we remain in denial. We prefer daydreaming, wishful thinking, things inshallah will work out, this is normal. Find somebody to blame, scapegoating. It reminds me like student who claims, there are students who claim saying, oh, I understand the material. I get this a lot of time, by the way. I understand the material, and I study very hard. and my study methods are good and right, efficient. I don't know why I'm not getting good grades yet. Say this package does not work together. And when we review, we find that no, he does not understand the material. No, his study strategies are not very efficient. So that's not true. If these all are then there should be results. If there are no results, there is a problem here. Or the more famous example is the soccer teams in most of our countries. Soccer team, the losers, they don't say the team is bad. No, the weather was not good, the wind was against us, the pitch was the referee was, you have a bad team, then go and fix it. All of this is not going to help you. All of these are excuses, are not going to help you. Go and find what are the flaws in the team and fix them. So that's unfortunately we laugh at this, but believe it or not, that's what we're doing. We repeat the same mistake, and we always try to come up with excuses why those attempts are failing. So before we try another time, because those attempts, they cost a lot of years and a lot of sacrifices. Just look at every country of the Arab Spring, how many years and how much blood and how much destruction. It costs a lot. So we cannot afford for them not to work. We have to make them work because they cost a lot. So before trying again and spend years and sacrifices on losing battle or in vain, and again put our hopes on an attempt, and then those hopes turns into disappointment, I believe we must revisit those three foundations, so that we can build on solid foundations. Revisit our understanding of the Deen, revisit our assessment of history, how and why we came to this point, because it didn't happen by chance. There are things that we can learn so that we avoid them, and revisit our understanding of the reality, because it's very superficial. We think we know our reality, but what we know is the symptoms. It's like the patient has a fever. That's not the problem. That's a symptom. So don't fool yourself that you know what the problem is. No, that's the symptoms of another problem that you have to find out about. We have to know where we are and how and why we came to this point. And we're going to start, inshallah, starting from today, talking about those three items one by one, and starting with our history, because I believe that's the key. Once we realize exactly our history, then we will find out that our religion has reached us through that history, not through the imaginary history that we have in mind, that it was all rosy and great and Islam sailed smooth through it. No, that's not true. Once we accept the true history, then we can understand that our current understanding of Islam came through that road, through that path. Then we can revisit it, and we have to revisit it, and that's open the door, inshallah, for any successful attempt in the future. Now, believe it or not, and that's probably very shocking conclusion, you may find it shocking conclusion, our reality, this current reality that you see, our history, our understanding of the Deen, so all three products, all of three items, they are the product of two major events that took place many centuries ago. Again, repeat, our current situation, our history, our understanding of the Deen is shaped by two turning points that took place many centuries ago, and they were never studied properly and given the attention they deserve. Two turning points, two key events, and both of them are related, as we'll see. The first one that we're going to focus on today is, you can call it an event, incident, turning point, and an idea, both together, one package. Event that took place and an idea that is prevalent among Muslims nowadays. The event is the transition from Khulafa al-Rashideen to monarchy. من الخلافة الراشدة إلى الملك. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam used the word mulk, not me. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam called hukum starting from Bani Umayyah, Umayyin, Abbasiyin. All of this, Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam called it mulk. This is monarchy, that's not khilafah. People called it khilafah, but Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a hadith said that this is mulk. This is monarchy. And in reality it is monarchy. And Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sadiq al-Amin, in his description, very accurate. What do you describe if a family is ruling and the man has absolute power and the power is passed on to his son? That's called monarchy. Now Muslim decided to call it khilafah, that's not going to change it. The system is called monarchy, mulk. That transition, it's still shaping our reality until this point. Together with that transition came the idea. What's the idea? Or fatwa. That the scholars decided to legitimize that power. They called it hukum al-mutaghallib. What's hukum al-mutaghallib? These two key words are shaping our reality until this point. If you look at the whole Muslim map, with very few exceptions, Malaysia, maybe Turkey, very few exceptions. Hukum al-mutaghallib. Those who are in charge, they are in charge by power. They were not chosen. They are not there because they are competent. They are not there. They are there because they were imposed. So we're talking about something that is continued until this moment. What is this hukm al-mutaghallib? The scholars decided that anybody who comes to power and establish law and order is legitimate, regardless of who he is, regardless of how he came to power, regardless of what he does. As long as there is stability, that power is legitimate. And we'll see that this was done out of good intention. It's not like people were manipulating. No, it was really out of good intention, and we'll talk about why they came up with that idea. But you can see that idea is extending until now. Just look at the Muslim map, cross those exceptions, one or two countries that are exception, and go from Morocco to Indonesia. You see that everybody who is in charge is there because he was imposed. Mutaghallib. Not chosen, not by consent, not because he's the best, the most qualified, not because he's the most competent. He's there because he was imposed. Whether it is a military coup, whether it is a monarchy that comes the son from, whatever. But he is there because he was imposed. So we transitioned into absolute power, and that is inherited, passed from father to son. You have one man, decides war and peace, manage the treasure with no transparency and no accountability. Whatever, he can give the poet money, he can give jawad, whatever. And it's his money. He can make any deal, any agreement with foreign powers. No accountability, no transparencies. And again, he rules not because he is competent or because he is qualified, but because he is hukum al-mutaghallib, the one who is self-imposed or was imposed on people. Now, what does this mean? Why this was very damaging? And as I told you, until now, it's shaping our reality. Because why a lot of populations, Muslim population nowadays, are accepting those rulers? Because in the back of their mind, that's legitimate. It happened throughout our history, so it is, and the scholars said it's legitimate. All what we care about is stability. Why this is important and what does it mean? First of all, what does it mean? It means that you live under those rules with no freedom, no dignity, no rights. Whatever they give you, that's a favor. كتر خيرهم. And you see people thanking governments for giving them anything, as if it's a favor, as if they are spending from their pockets. This has instilled the idea in the minds of Muslims that we are subjects, not citizens. احنا رعية, not citizens who have rights. We are subjects at the service of the ruler. So we turn things upside down, whether while instead of him being a public servant, نفديه بالروح بالدم. And we are ready to die for the ruler. Like, why? He's a public servant who's just doing his job, and he should be at the service of people, not the other way around. That kind of life is not appropriate for a believer, because this is the life Quran called the life of cattle. يتمتعون ويأكلون كما تأكل الأنعام. If there is a ruler that only allows you to eat and just live and survive, that's not the life of a human being. Life without dignity and without freedom is worthless. That's not the life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen for us. يتمتعون ويأكلون كما تأكل الأنعام, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Some of you know the statement that Benjamin Franklin said, and it's very famous. He said, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Those who say, just for the sake of stability and safety, now we're ready to give up our rights and freedom and liberty, etc., they end up losing both. And that's what happened time and again for Muslims in those many centuries. They give up their rights and their freedom and liberty for safety, they end up losing both. Because there is no limit to corruption and there is no limit to oppression. Now we're going to talk about the consequences of this, because this is very bad. That turning point has caused a lot of damage. And we're going to talk about why it has happened. And as I said, it is still shaping our situation until this moment. Now the consequences is, for 13 and a half centuries, after the 4 years of Khilafah Rashida, 4 years, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam from the Hijrah, he established that state that is based on constitution and citizenship. Lasted for 4 years. Then we made the transition. Then we have 13 and a half centuries. Muslims were swinging between dictatorship and chaos. You know the pendulum? Dictatorship, chaos, and then new dictatorship, and chaos, etc. So Dawla Umayyah, stable, and then becomes weak. Muslim enter into chaos, chaotic period, until Abbasi comes and establishes power, and then loss, and then etc. So the result of that turning point is 13 and a half centuries, and we are swinging between dictatorship and chaos. Just to give you an example, one example, because there are many. One example is the Mughal invasion that destroyed Baghdad and was the result of one decision by one Muslim ruler. There was a state called Khwarizmi state. One man, they used to have good relationship with the Mughal neighbors. One time, the ruler decided to kill some Mughal traders and drop them, take their gold and jewelry. That triggered this whole Mughal invasion that destroyed Iraq and Baghdad, etc. One decision. To tell you, when people are dependent on one man decision, what's going to happen to them? Very recent time. Iraq, since 1990, until now, that's how many years? That's 35 years. Still suffering because of that decision of Saddam to invade Kuwait. Until now. Still. 2 major wars, sanctions in between, and this chaotic situation that you see now. Still. Why? Because of that one decision by one man. Now, when people are dependent completely, our people lived for centuries completely dependent on one person. So our destiny is dependent on what? Is dependent on a father succeeding in raising his son or fails. And if that son, if the father fails to raise his son in a good way, and that son becomes the Khalifa, now it's a disaster. We're gone. So you can see how shaky we are. We are all dependent on a father succeeding or failing in raising his children. Even if he succeeds with some of them and fails with one, and that becomes a Khalifa, now we're gone. And we have seen, of course, there are some pious Khalifa, competent in our history, but there are some ones that are terrible. And they caused a lot of damage. Now, swinging between dictatorship and chaos until this moment. So we're not talking about something that has ended already. Going back to the Arab Spring countries, starting from Tunisia, there was a dictatorship. It was toppled. All these countries, they went through transition, chaotic situation, and then dictatorship was established. In Tunisia, in Libya, today, they are ruled by one person forever. Egypt, same. So it's still, the pendulum is still working, because we have lived under that dictatorship. People revolted, toppled those regimes. They went through period of chaotic period, like Yemen, Libya, etc. And then until a new dictatorship was reinstated. So we're still swinging, unfortunately, in that situation, to tell you how bad the consequences were among that, because of that turning point. Now, someone can say, now all the rulers are self-imposed, mutaghallib, and I don't see any who is like chosen by people. But some people can say that this ruler or that ruler is very popular. And that's true, by the way. That's very true. Start from Morocco, go to the end of the Muslim world. In every country, every ruler is popular. He's popular among a segment, good segment of the society. People, so that doesn't mean anything. Why? Because you know what the true popularity is measured when? The day after. Because all these dictators were popular until the last day. But when they were toppled, nobody went to the street to ask for them to be reinstated or defend them. People will welcome the new guy, the new mutaghallib. It happened with everyone in the last half a century or more. One day before, you think that's so popular. Now, I've seen it in Tunisia. The Bourguiba used to be perceived as so popular among people. People really love him. Yani. When he was toppled, nobody went to the street to say, to even protest him. It's gone. People start putting the new picture of the new guy. It's very unfortunate that our people deal with their rulers this way. That as long as you are in power, we love you, we revere you, etc. But if you are toppled, then we're going to transfer all of this to whoever comes after you. It's a very sad reality. Why? Because our people, they still think as subjects, not as citizens, and because in the back of their mind, this kind of government is legitimate. Why? Because whoever comes and establishes law and order and stability, they are legitimate just because of that event and that idea. Now, why scholars came up with this idea of Hukm al-Mutaghallib? It was a reaction to the bloody civil war that happened, unfortunately, what we call the Fitna Kubra, when Sahaba, they fought each other. Very bloody wars cost the lives of thousands of people here. It was very bad. People could not even believe it because they never thought this is going to happen. So the shock was huge. So the reaction was what? The reaction, how can we make sure this does not happen again? Which is good. That should be the proper reaction. But how to do it, they did it the wrong way. How to do it is to find out what was the problem and fix it. Because during the Khulafa al-Rashidin, things were working smooth. But there was a problem that was revealed later on. Which is what? which is the system was completely dependent on the individual, on Umar ibn Khattab, on Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, it was completely, no institutions. It was completely dependent on the individual. So to solve the problem, you come up with the system that is even more dependent on the individual. So rather than fixing the problem, you even made it worse. So what the problem was the lack of institution. Muslims practiced shura for 40 years. Leadership by consent, transparency, accountability, every item in democracy was there at that time. But it was not institutionalized. Why institutions are important? Institutions make the system independent of the individual. I've seen recent time, Korea, twice, they removed their president and nothing happened to the country. Why? Because there are institutions. It's not dependent on the person. In every Muslim country, when the ruler is removed, its situation becomes chaotic. Why? Because everything was in his hand. Everything is completely dependent on him. So, yes, you try to avoid it, but your reading and assessment of the problem was wrong, and therefore the treatment was wrong. What was missing is an institution to organize and channels the differences, and then make sure that they are solved through civic engagement, not through fight, power struggle, and ensure smooth transfer of power. Somebody dies, somebody finishes their term, and then power is passed on smoothly without any going through any chaotic situation. So these are the consequences, and that's the starting point, and you can see how one event or one idea can shape the lives of Muslims for centuries, and it is still affecting our situation until this point. وَتُوبُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونتوب إليه نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, that tells you the importance of studying our history, and that tells you the importance of having the proper assessment. When you solve the problem, 90% of the solution is in having the proper diagnosis or assessment. Any physician will tell you, with the wrong diagnosis, no matter what kind of treatment is administered, it's not going to solve the problem. So that tells you how it is important to have the proper diagnosis of the problem so that you can solve it properly. And unfortunately, for 4 years, we had a great system. We were way ahead of the whole world, but it was not institutionalized. So when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq died or was about to die, he recommended Umar ibn Khattab. There was no system. There was no mechanism. Umar ibn Khattab was assassinated, about to die. How he's going to transfer power? He chose 6 people and say, you need to choose one amongst you. These are the people the Rasul ﷺ promised Jannah and was pleased, died while he's pleased with them. And by the way, look at Umar ibn Khattab. He refused to appoint his son because it was suggested, Abdullah ibn Umar. And then he excluded Zayd ibn Khattab because he's his cousin, even though he meets the requirement to be among those selected people, but he excluded him because he was his cousin. Selected 6 people, Mubashirina bil Jannah, say, meet and choose one of you. Uthman ibn Affan did not choose anybody. Died, so things were chaotic. So that was the problem. But the system was a great system, but completely dependent on the person. We went into a terrible system that is still completely dependent on a person, so the original problem was not fixed. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم اشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا توفنا وانت راض عنا واختم بالصالحات أعمالنا واجعل خير أعمالنا خواتمها خير أيامنا ومن نلقاك. ربنا ارحم والدينا كما ربونا صغارا وارحم موتانا وجميع موتى المسلمين. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين. صلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وأقم الصلاة.